Read, Right, and Wrong is brought to you by the team at City Limits Publishing. City Limits Publishing is a small, independent press created by authors for authors. You can best support the podcast by heading over to citylimitspublishing.com to browse our ever-expanding library featuring unique reading experiences in all genres. Sign up for the City Limits Publishing Book Club and get one new release of your choice delivered every month alongside a curated classic book. Learn all about this and more at citylimitspublishing.com. In the meantime, let's get right into today's episode. Hey there, everybody. What's going on? This is Read, Right, and Wrong, the author chat show at City Limits Publishing, where we discuss everything we've read, what we're writing, and what's wrong with it all. I'm your host, Peter Fenton, and today we are talking all things children's books, tornadoes, and house building with author-illustrator team Rebecca Rose Moody and Lauren Reese, whose new book, The House the Storm Built, is releasing March 25th. Rebecca and Lauren, welcome.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, it's so exciting that we have this important story coming on to the City Limits Publishing Library. My first question to my guests today, tell us a little about yourself. You're brand new to City Limits Publishing, so here's your first impression.
Yeah. So Lauren and I have been friends a really long time, and we became parents at around the same age, and so our kids are friends, and we had talked for a while about wanting to write kids' books together. And last year, in the middle of the pandemic, for whatever reason, just felt like exactly the right time, and there was so much motivation between the two of us to start collaborating. And Lauren, I don't know.
Yeah, we have very similar parenting styles. Our aesthetics are really similar. We're both very much into nature and just loving the planet and respectful parenting, all these things that are really similar. And so Becca's writing style is very whimsical, and it pairs really well with my illustration style. And so we've just had a lot of fun writing books together and just being a team and figuring out the whole world of publishing together. And Becca's been writing a lot longer than I've been illustrating. I've been a painter pretty much my whole life, mainly watercolor. I was an art teacher for a while. And once I had kids, I knew I wanted to be home more. And so I just kind of picked up my painting and started doing a lot more commissions and freelance work. And then I wanted to write a book with for my daughter about some of the things she was going through. So I started to pick up an illustration style, and Becca helped me write that book. And then from there, we just started having all these ideas. And that's kind of where the book, The House the Storm Built, kind of came from, was just an idea. And so we made it happen.
Yeah. So this is not the first book you've written together.
This is not. This would be, well, we have completed one and we have like 3 others in the works. So we have quite a few ideas, and then we have some others that are completed.
This is exciting. Yeah, there's I know the email that I interface with you guys is Fox and Bear Books. Is that a company name or a?
Yeah. So that was the first book that we worked on together, and Lauren had already done so much of it. She'd come up with the story and all the illustrations and some of the original text when she brought me on to help with the writing. And we envisioned that being a whole series at some point. It's currently out on submission with our agent, hoping to find a good publishing fit for it. But it's a book that we hope helps parents who are maybe dipping their toe into like respectful parenting or parenting kind of in a different way than a lot of us were raised. And it's all about opening up and feeling comfortable sharing hard feelings with your caregiver.
Nice.
Yeah, we've been able to give that book to therapists, teachers, parents, all different people, and they've all been able to use it. And it's been really great to hear stories. I think Becca and I, anything we write together in the children's book world or collaborate on will have some kind of message. It's hard for us to just make something just fun. I mean, they are fun, but we have such a heart to like give good quality work out in the world. Important messages for sure. So, yeah.
It sounds like the two of you make a really good team. I definitely saw that in the book, that the writing paired really well with the art style. So I mean, I highly recommend the book if you're listening to this out there. But let's transition into our first segment. So recent reading. So Rebecca and Lauren, let's talk about children's books. I mean, you're both mothers, so you're frequently reading to your kids and you've written a children's book. What have you been reading to your kids? Oh, Lauren has props.
Yeah, I guess this is video, right?
Yeah.
I am a sucker for good illustration because I am an artist. And so I keep my favorite books by my art desk, not in my kids' room because I don't want them to destroy the books. But one of my favorite illustrators is Madeline Klopper, and she does a few books that I love. There's Tiny Perfect Things. It's a great style.
Uh-huh.
And she does this one, The Keeper of Wild Words, which is a wonderful book about finding beauty in nature, and anything that's really focused on nature I am a big fan of. And another author that I love, or an illustrator, because I focus on the illustrator, is Rebecca Green, and she does a lot of great books, and this is one, Becoming a Good Creature.
Oh, that is pretty.
All about finding messages, like finding characteristics in animals that we can emulate to be better humans. And yeah, there's just there's some good books out there for kids for sure.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And Rebecca, what have you been reading?
So I swear my kids really get to pick what we're reading. I feel like in our household. So I have read recently a lot of Richard Scarry, which we love.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading him when I was a kid, and my boys both absolutely love him. So that's a big favorite these days.
Yeah.
Another one that like we read so often is My Blue is Happy by Jessica Young.
Huh.
And it's just the sweetest story. It's very soft and simple. Like it's not super elaborate, the story. It's the girl is going through the colors and talking about, how certain colors have certain connotations to people, but then to her, there's something different. So her blue is happy. And my 3-year-old now calls the color blue, like my blue is happy, as in like, I want to wear my blue is happy t-shirt, and, like hold my blue is happy truck. Like, so that book is
full name.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's another one that we just love in our house.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So what about adult books? I mean, I know that children's books are not the end all be all of literature. Are the two of you big readers?
I wish I had more time to read.
You're in a book club. Come on, you read.
I do. I will say that so I'm in a book club, and I have been for a couple of years. Lauren did it for a few of those years, and then hasn't so much lately. With time being what it is, I fully understand. So I feel like that has been so helpful, especially in getting me to read books that maybe otherwise I wouldn't have found. We most recently read The Stationery Shop, and I loved it. I just thought it was beautiful. One of the best books that I'd read in a long time. Yeah. And then I think Lauren and I both read a ton of parenting literature. That's just something I can't get away from. So I am reading Hunt, Gather, Parent, and I'm obsessed. I love it so much.
Who wrote that one?
Her name is, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Unfortunately, her name is Michaeline Duclef. I don't know. I'm really probably butchering that. But she's a science writer for NPR. And so, yeah, it's fascinating. She goes into 3 different kind of indigenous cultures to learn from them about kind of their cultural parenting practices, and then kind of pairs that with research on why those things are working in those cultures, and also completely picks apart the Western parenting model. So it's been a lot, and I'm only like a fifth of the way into the book, but it's so good.
Cool. Lauren, have you been reading any parenting books too?
I have. Well, honestly, I have been trying to get more into audiobooks just because of my time. I don't have a lot of time to sit and read, but when I'm painting or doing whatever it is I need to do, I try to listen to books. But I don't really know where to start. So I don't know if this is cheesy or not, but I've just been trying to read a lot of Reese Witherspoon's, like her Reese book club, because she recommends great books. So last night I finished, what is it called? Before We Were Yours, I think, Lisa Wingate. I don't know. It was one of her books, and it was wonderful. But yeah, I do read a lot of parenting books. Anything that goes in line, again, with respectful parenting, positive parenting, anything Janet Lansbury or Shefali Tsabari, just really good concepts that the Western like culture we don't really focus on. And it's a lot of playing the long game in parenting, and just treating children as whole people and not people we control, but humans that we get to guide and help. One reason why we want to write books for that focus on this narrative, because I think it just needs to be out there more in the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, not being a parent myself, I'm not reading a ton of parenting books, but I read a really good one from Cindy Wang Brandt. But she wrote a book called Parenting Forward, and it was a book about having conversations about like sexuality, racism, like those sorts of conversations with kids and talking to them like full human beings. And she believes that every kid is a revolutionary. And it was a fascinating book. So even as someone without kids, I think it's interesting about how to talk about issues that are so complex on a more simple level that still communicates, hey, this is an important thing that you need to be thinking about. So
and starting young. You can't be, I think we think that kids have to be older to understand these complex concepts of racism and sexuality and all these different things, but they actually can understand quite a bit, and there's ways to do it, the right way to do it, I feel like. So that's great.
And it's through stories. It's through stories like The House the Storm Built. Which brings us into our next segment. Transition. Let's jump ahead and talk about your new book, The House the Storm Built. So tell us about it.
Well, I can tell you about why we wrote it. I mean, well, Becca
Absolutely.
wrote it.
I mean, I left that as open-ended as possible, didn't I? So
I mean,
just start from the beginning.
It's been almost, I guess, exactly a year since the tornado came through Nashville. As many people know, we were asleep in bed and we heard the alarms, but you hear the sirens and you're like, it's probably not that big of a deal. But
Nashville, I feel like it's important to note that in Nashville, the alarms go off way too much. Like sometimes it'll just be for a thunderstorm. I think they've kind of tried to fix that. But anyway, ignoring the alarms is pretty common, I feel like.
Yeah, it's Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Yeah. And we get storms, but I don't know. I've never been, it's kind of like, it's not a big deal. Like I don't know. I've been through it before and it's just not usually a big deal. So that's kind of how we thought of it. And then we got the notification on our phone of like softball size hail or something. It was crazy. And I'm like, I don't know if we should ignore that. And so we kind of got out of bed, my husband and I, and we were just, our house is very small. Our house was very small. And the only room that was like center in the house was the bathroom. So we put a few pillows in there and we're just kind of like, let's just make it cozy. We'll grab the kids. And then we started hearing that train noise that was so loud. And so I was like, grab the kids out of the bunk bed. And so he ran in there and just like jerked them out of the bed and kind of threw them in the bathroom. And the second he shut the door, all the glass, the windows all shattered and we could hear the roof like ripping up. Wow. So we just like covered them. And it was like seconds and then it was over. And they were like still half asleep. It was so loud and then it was silent. And I remember just shaking and being like, what just happened? And he like opened the door and he's like, the roof is gone, Lauren. And then he went out and like looked in the backyard. He's like, the fence is gone, the shed is gone, the tree is gone, it's all gone. And we were just like, oh my gosh. So we kept the kids in the room. They had a flashlight and a book and they were just like kind of talking, thinking it was a fun sleepover or like a fun thing.
Yeah.
And we were just in shock. And everyone was coming out of their houses looking around just like, what just happened? And then, it was just silent, but like, we're all just like in shock. All the trees are gone. It went right through my neighborhood. And to this day, you turn on our street and there just isn't any trees. It's crazy.
Wow.
But it was pretty crazy. And then quickly the rain started coming. So everyone's running around trying to grab anything that went into the yard. We're grabbing because we had a lot of boxes of photographs and memorabilia stuff in our shed. And we're like, grab everything you can. And so we're just trying to grab things before the rain hit. And my brother-in-law was there so quickly. He has this big truck and he has all of his tarps and all these things. And he was there, but we didn't even ask him to come, but he was there like 30 minutes after the tornado hit. And he's helping us tarp up the roof so that the rain doesn't come into the house and destroy everything. But it was pretty intense. It was pretty intense.
Yeah.
We had tornado watches just, like a week ago?
Just a few days ago, really.
And we haven't really had many storms since the tornado. And my husband and I, we didn't realize we had like PTSD, and we were in trauma. Like the trauma of it was like hitting us, and we were looking at each other like, we know we're okay, but our hearts are racing and it's hard to breathe. And wow, I'm feeling that too. We're like, huh, we have PTSD. Like, we're like, this is a trauma response. How interesting. So we're still working through some things, obviously, now that it's been a year, but yeah, that was the tornado. So Becca wrote.
Yeah, so I guess it was in December. Lauren has been so great about sharing her family's story and also about making sure that she's like helping her children process all of this. And I think it was in December that she posted an update on their journey with like rebuilding their house on the same lot. And I think someone maybe on Facebook had commented like, can't wait to see you illustrate this. And I was like, oh, she should illustrate this. And then like within like 2 hours, like there was a rough draft, and I sent it to Lauren like, hey, this is your story. We can do whatever you want with it. If you want this to be a storybook, I think it could be a good one. If you don't, it's fine. And here's like a little story for you and your family. And instead, she's as crazy.
Well, I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. Like, it was just short, sweet. It doesn't go into crazy detail, but it's still detailed enough that it remembers the important parts. And I read it to my husband and we both were tearing up. And I'm like, this needs to be out in the world. This is just really sweet. Like, this is important. I don't know. So then I think I messaged Becca like right after. I'm like, we're making this a book.
Yeah. So you talk about this being a traumatic event for you, Lauren. How has the process of putting this book together and illustrating it been healing for you, or has it been healing for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to be working on a book and it has a end that hasn't actually happened yet. We're still in the process. We are staying on the same property that our house was. So we did watch it. They demolished it. They took it down. We watched them do that, which was interesting to like see this bulldozer take your house down, and you see the walls of the kids' room like from the street, because you just see, because we painted. As an artist, I think every room had my signature on. Like, I had paint everywhere. It was just a fun house. And so we're not finished. We haven't moved back in. We're still in that transition waiting season. Yeah. But starting the book off with our old house and just kind of remembering the moments. There's some. It's not exactly my house, but it's close enough. And just remembering the little things that we loved about it, and asking the kids like, "What do you remember? What would you like me to include?" And so it was just really nostalgic to go back and just like paint the moments in the house that we loved, dancing in the living room, the things that made the house really special. And then what's been really great is there's a part in the story where the kids get to run through the walls. And just last night, the framing is up enough that the kids were running through the walls last night. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're actually living the book. Like, I painted that before it happened. And so, the last pages, it's our home again. And we're back to where like we have rebuilt and we found our home. And so we're not there yet, but we're getting close. So it's been really cathartic to paint my house destroyed with windows shattered. There's a page where we say goodbye to our house. We like touch the walls and
I was wondering if did that happen?
Yeah, I have it filmed. My kids are saying goodbye to their room and thanking the house, and because it's the house they grew up. I mean, they've been there pretty much their whole lives, and so just thanking the house for keeping us safe and saying goodbye to their room and saying goodbye to all the spaces. It was really important. It was a little hard to watch it all come down, but I think it was a good like closure. Like, okay, this was a season of our life, and now we're moving on, and we're all still here together. And we were able to keep a lot of our like material items. Some things we needed, we had to replace because it got destroyed, but that helped because we still have our piano, and that the piano plays a big role in the story. Throughout the story, the piano is like our constant. We don't have a TV in our house, and so our piano is kind of our centerpiece.
Interesting.
Yeah, we've never owned one. It's just something we've never had. So we always try to play. Evan plays music at night, and the kids will dance, and so the piano has been like an anchor in our rental, and it will be an anchor in our new home of like, this is our constant. So
yeah, that's really nice. And I mean, I think it's words to the effect in the book that wherever we're all together, that's home. And you're living that, It's nice. So Rebecca, capturing all of that as the writer of the story, how did you go about that? about capturing Lauren's story and putting it into words, not going into too much detail, but telling enough of the story. What was that process like?
Well, I think I wanted it to feel hopeful. So I do think the whole book is kind of like headed towards, I mean, the title is The House the Storm Built. So it's kind of the momentum of the story is trying to get them into their new home where they're going to feel safe and settled again. And then it was great having Lauren like on hand, and we talk all the time because I got to be like, okay, like I'm having the kids like playing with or like riding bikes out in the front yard. And she's like, well, they don't really ride bikes too much. And I'm like, I guess that's true. And so we're like, no, they're watching birds. So it was great having her on hand to make sure that I was being like true to the story and true to her experience. But I think making it feel hopeful and making it feel reflective of really the grace that I feel like Lauren has walked through this experience with. I feel like she's just handled a lot of change and a lot of hard things with just so much presence, especially with her kids. And so I just wanted to make sure that was conveyed in these like really peaceful parents being like, you know, we're gonna get to our new home and it'll be here before you know it. And yeah.
Also, Becca was there like the day after helping get things out of the house. I mean, she's been part of the journey. I don't know if I would have been able to get through all of this without having her to like be like, what's up, my life, or just helping. I mean, so she's been it through the whole thing too. But also the crazy thing is the whole concept of home is when you're with your family it's been really important, not just because of the tornado, but this year of COVID. So yeah, Nashville is an incredible city where people show up to help when there's tragedy. And so, I mean, this next day, there were hundreds of volunteers everywhere helping, cleaning up, picking up tree branches. And like, I mean, it was insane. I've never seen so many people out trying to get things done. And then about 2 days later, everyone's in isolation and COVID starts. And you go from this like extreme event to all these people surrounding you, loving you, hugging you, to all of a sudden you don't see anyone, and the kids are now with us in the house, and we're all in the house, and we never leave, and right. It's this extreme, like going from community to isolation has been quite a crazy experience, but it means you really lean on family. I mean, all we had was each other kind of thing. So the idea of like home is with your family, it's like it really is, because that's all a lot of people have, is they've just been home with their family this whole year. So
yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, the time that we have spent, yeah, I think that this whole year has kind of forced a lot of people to do some introspection of what really does matter in life and who really matters and what relationships are the most important. And I mean, a lot of people, that is the family,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you look back and you see, who have I really been who have I been texting or FaceTiming, or who have I been talking to during this year? Like, who's really mattered? Those are the people that maybe matter the most in your life, because I think a lot of us have just simplified material items, simplified relationships, simplified job. I don't know. It's just been a year. It's like kind of really, like you said, introspection and reflection of like what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And combine that universal experience of COVID with the experience of losing your house in a storm. I mean, yeah, multiply that by 1 billion, you know. Yeah. So if you had to pick a favorite page in the book, what would it be? Your favorite illustration, Lauren, and your favorite words, Rebecca?
I mean, I think I love, favorite words. I mean, I think that
or favorite illustration,
my favorite
whatever you want.
I love the illustration where they're like on the picnic blanket and there's the house behind them, and mm-hmm. It says in like that the house will be done before they know it. I think that's really sweet and I love it. Yeah. And I think my favorite words are just the end of the book where spoiler, where they're in their new home and it's a house that's built of like stone and memory. Because that ideally that is where we're living, and where we have physical spaces, but there's also then all of the memories that make our spaces important. And then also kind of thinking about all of the things that remain even after drastic change. So in the story, there's also the peach tree and the magnolia tree that make it through the storm, and that they're able to grow back green again. And I just love that concept of rebirth and regeneration.
Mm-hmm. It is a really powerful page. Oh.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There's different things about different pages I really like. I love the first image where it's the full city before the storm, because it was just it just felt like, this is not even really about the storm, but it just felt like simpler times pre-COVID. I don't know, this idea of just like going out and just talking to people without a mask on. I don't know. And I like seeing Nashville far in the distance. It makes me just like feel like, it's not that I'm not patriotic. America's a great place, but I feel I love Nashville, and I love, like, I feel very, like, I love my city. And so I think that page is really special to me. But there's an image in the book that I just really enjoy painting, and it was the piano, and it's Evan and I think my head is maybe on his shoulder and he's playing. I think we're in the rental home, somewhere in the middle. And I remember painting that thinking, like, I just don't think I could have gone through this without this human who has just been there through all of it. And with that, also the tornado page where we're all together, and it's a lot of black. It's like capturing the chaos of this storm that's hitting, but we're all together. And this is like this experience that the four of us will always have, even when they're grown adults. Like we went through this natural disaster that they hopefully will never experience anything like it again. I don't know, or I hope I don't either, but like this was something that will change who we are forever. And like, there's something about like painting all of us just kind of close on the page, surrounded by this chaos, and just, I don't know. It's like sweet. I mean, it's a crazy moment, but it's just like the sweetness of like, we're all safe, we're all together. So
yeah. It's complex. It's complicated,
it is.
But simple. It's a paradox. Yeah. So what has the response been to this book so far? Early readers, I mean, I've shared some of my thoughts, of course, but what have some of your early readers thought of The House the Storm Built?
Looking at you, Becca.
Me? I feel like I think people, especially most of the people who've read it, know us well, and know Lauren and her story. And so I think it's been, this response has been really sweet. And again, I think there's just this sense of hope. And I think it's as we're saying, I think for a lot of our community anyway, the tornado and COVID were kind of linked. Just that is the week that our city went into lockdown, the week that they closed schools was earlier that week the tornado had hit. So I feel like hopefulness is hopefully what people get from the book. And I think especially now as we're starting to get so close, I think, fingers crossed, to the end of the pandemic, I feel like just hopefulness is what people are getting from the story.
Yeah, and we've had people read it who maybe didn't go through or have the same tornado experience, but I know someone who read it who went through a hurricane, and they were just like, this is just really important. And we're realizing, like, yeah, any natural disaster like this, you may not go through a tornado, but just any experience that's traumatic, just the idea that there is like hope for healing, no matter what it may be, I think it's just a message that is universal. That you can get out of it. Like, I don't think you have to have been through a tornado to enjoy the story. I think there's something sweet about, like, hard things in life will happen, and and good things can come from it, even if it takes time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, so a portion of the proceeds go to Hands on Nashville. And I think that was really important to Lauren and me, just because because Nashville is such a has such a volunteer spirit. And like Lauren said, I was floored going to her house, I guess the day after, maybe 2 days after the tornado, and just seeing how many people were there. It was unbelievable. And I think that Hands on Nashville is such an important organization because it helps to make it possible for more volunteers to reach more families and reach more communities. Because it's one thing to pitch in with people that but I think Hands on Nashville makes it possible to pitch in with other families and other communities that otherwise you might not have exposure to. And so I think they're such a great organization, and I'm really happy that they'll get a portion of all of the profit from this book.
Yeah.
They're not just a great organization, they are organized. And so I know Becca, you volunteered with them in the past, and I have too, back when the flood hit Nashville years ago, because they tell you where to be, what to bring, like what to expect. They just make it really clear, and you can just kind of jump in, and it's just organized, which I really appreciate, because there were definitely a lot of volunteers out trying to help and not knowing what to do, and they're just walking around like, who wants a toilet paper or water bottle? Like, you don't know what to do. And so having an organization that can kind of guide you, tell you where to be and what to do, I think it's really important. So yeah,
nonprofits are great, but nonprofits that are organized are better.
Yeah, it matters. Well, when you're organizing volunteers, you really need to have it together, because these aren't people that necessarily you've been training for months and months. It's people who want to help, and they don't know how, or they don't know where. So yeah, it really is helpful.
I had a boss once that said he would always say nonprofit is a tax status, not a management style.
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
That's about right.
All right. So let's move into our final segment. So that brings us to our final segment, all the wrongs. So we've talked about what you're reading, what you're writing. Let's talk about where things have gone wrong. So this is a pretty open-ended segment. So let's start with other writers and other books. What are some books that you have read that you just could not get into? Like, maybe this was a book you read to your kids, or maybe this was a book in book club. What was just one that it just wasn't working for you?
Oh man.
I'm feeling like remarkably unpicky at the moment. I'm feeling like I give people the benefit of the doubt, even if I don't love something.
Yeah.
All that's coming to mind right now is things that I have made that have gone wrong. I'm feeling I'm feeling
Let's
kind
talk
of
about
like, it. Well, Becca and I have, we are figuring out this whole illustrator author dynamic.
Sure.
Because I am not necessarily like we're very much a collaborative team. So we're trying to find our flow. And after we had put our other book up for submission, before this book even was a thing, we were like, let's just write something fun about whatever. Let's just make a book. Why not? And if we could go back, we probably would do it different. But we had all these ideas, and then I just got really excited. It was all about nature and about I'm really into foraging. Really like
foraging.
Yes, my husband and I, we go look for mushrooms, and we just every weekend. Now that spring is out, we cannot wait. Or we eat a lot of the we call it our backyard edibles. A lot of the greens from our yard, the violet greens, the dandelion greens. We'll make salads and stuff. But
at first it felt like we were working, like we were exactly on the same page, because we were like, okay, let's just take a break. Lauren and I talk all the time. We're like, let's just take a little bit of time, and we'll like come back with like some ideas that we've had. And when we came back together, we were like, oh my God, we've thought of exactly the same book. Like, we're like, okay, little child in the woods, wandering around collecting food. And we were like, we both came up with the same idea, and we're like, this is great. I was like, well, you can just like start illustrating, and I'll just start writing, and it's gonna be.
Becca was very confident. She said, you illustrate, I can write anything. Like you illustrate it, whatever you're feeling, and I'll write.
Oh yeah, I was like, I can match whatever you illustrate. It's not gonna be a problem.
Okay,
like,
so
no.
I created like, I don't know, 10 pages. I was really in it. I was like, this is so great, and I have all these ideas. And Becca, you're looking at it like now you're trying to write a story based on illustrations that we don't even have a story. But I was just really like passionate about this thing that wasn't even a thing.
I feel like the illustrations are so lovely that like every time I got one, I was like, okay, so I've got to like make sure that what I write is as lovely as this and relates to this other image and tells some story at some point along the way. And so like by the end of it, like there's just no plot, and it's just a whole bunch of really lovely illustrations and a really boring story. And I'm like, I don't know, like we still don't know what to do with it. We even like talked to our agent about it. She gave us some like great feedback, and I just like stared at all of the pages, like all of the illustrations, like I don't know what to do. It
really is some of my favorite paintings I've ever done, but I'm treating it like this was great practice. I think what we realize is there's a reason why people write a story first before they illustrate it. There's a reason this has been going on for forever. And we need to fit that, because there's a reason why that works. So
I was going to ask, so your process is you write the story first and then Lauren illustrates it.
That is now our process,
sense, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see if anything happens. I mean, it's a lovely thing, but it wasn't a really set plan. But we just realized quickly that Becca should be a writer and write a
Mhm.
beautiful story, and I can come in and illustrate it. So it was a good lesson of like order matters. Having
Mhm.
a plan matters. So yeah.
Well, that was a great story. I'm glad I drew that out of you. Rebecca, what else have you written? So Lauren said that you've been a writer longer than she's been an illustrator. What other things have you written?
Yeah, so I think the important clarification there is just that I've never written books for children before.
Mhm.
This was like these were my first attempts at that. And I'm definitely still learning so much. And there's just obviously an infinite amount of learning to do about the genre and what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
But historically, I've written novels. And so,
Mhm.
so I have one young adult novel that's like getting pretty close to being ready to go on submission, I think, fingers crossed. And then I have a novel that's been on submission for 2 years, and I
Mhm.
think it's about to get, I mean, I think I'm switching agents, and I think I'm pulling it from submission, and I'll probably rework it, and then hopefully it'll go back out on submission. It's been rejected by just some really amazing people, so I feel like it's got a lot of potential.
Fair enough. Do you have any advice for someone who is starting out querying?
Oh gosh. I mean, I used Query Tracker, and I even went and like sprung for the premium subscription, I guess, which gives you more facts and data. And I found it really helpful. And I used Manuscript Wishlist, which I found really helpful. But I do feel like we found our agent kind of, I mean, I queried her for Fox and Bear, and
Mhm.
then she's just like miraculously turned out to be the best fit for my fiction and my novels, which just feels like I kind of fell into that. So I wish that I could say I, submitted to people only through Query Tracker and managed to find like my ideal agent for my novels, but I really feel like Alice like fell from heaven kind of.
I was gonna say Becca did all the work, but getting an agent like has been a godsend because she's just been, at least our agent, she's been amazing, and she's been able to guide us, and she's even working with me for illustrations for possible other projects. And
Oh, cool.
I don't think I could do all it. Like, I don't think we would be where we are if she wasn't there to kind of help navigate some of the things, because we are full-time moms too, and it's just
Yeah.
there's a lot going on, and I am so proud of Becca and all of the, I mean, because when we did our first book, we did it all ourselves. We were going to publish it ourselves, and she was emailing people left and right, and like she was doing all this work that like I don't know if I could have done it all. Just and so having an agent to kind of step in and be that bridge from you to publishers, I think is just really important, because they have the connections that you may not have.
And just like the industry intelligence that I just don't have. Like there's such a
Yeah.
difference. And I feel like this is a misconception, right? But it's like, just because you're a writer doesn't mean you know much about the publishing industry necessarily.
Mhm.
And there is so much to learn. And it's nice that Alice knows it and I don't have to anymore.
Well, you can focus on what matters to you. You can focus
Right.
on what matters, but you are a writer. You can
Right.
do that. We're like, we were spending so much time, I want to just paint beautiful things, and
Mhm.
spending time trying to figure out who should we email, and like even like formatting. Like it's just, there's so much that like we had to teach ourselves how to do, or we're YouTubing like, how do you like margins? Oh, okay, let's figure this out, and just trying to figure it all out. And so having other people step in and do that side of it all, and then you can just
Mhm.
focus on the creative side, because that's what we are. We're artists, and we just want to create. So it's
Yeah.
really great to have someone to kind of step in and take that role for us.
Yeah, it is nice that there are people out there whose job it is to
Yes.
know these things for us,
Yes,
as I'm a
absolutely.
writer as well. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I know. Well, Lauren, Rebecca, it has been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I'm really excited to see your book released, and I can't wait for everyone to read it. You can get your copy of The House the Storm Built everywhere books are sold. So you can buy it directly through the City Limits Publishing website. You can order it through Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Those are the big ones. So yeah, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Keep reading. Read to your kids if you have them, or read to yourself, because reading's important.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening today. I'm Peter Fenton, and this is Read, Right, and Wrong. What are you still doing listening to this episode? Hit pause, head over to citylimitspublishing.com and find your next book. I'm your host, Peter Fenton. You can find me online at bypeterfenton.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at peterfent. Have a great day, everyone.